It's my first time to be in this event. I actually didn't expect it to be this wide. It looks smaller on the television screen. All right, so when I received the invitation for this event, I was initially thinking of doing something technical. Maybe I could talk about the best practices for web development, or maybe something about making an app using AngularJS. But then I realized there's a whole lot of resources online. You could go to Code Academy, or maybe Google something and look it up in Stack Overflow. And the thing about technical lectures, 90% of the time, you'd forget about it. And the 10% that you retain, you'll have to try it in order to actually learn it. So then I said, maybe I take a step back and I guess do something inspirational, or at least try to be inspirational. So that's why I decided that my talk is going to be titled Decide What to Be and Go Be It. It's taken from the lyric of a song by the Avett Brothers called Head Full of Doubt, Road Full of Promise. Now, first off, let me introduce myself. My name is Francis. I consider myself a geek. I'm an entrepreneur. I co-founded a company called Muber. It was an Atlanta-based company until 2 weeks ago, where we recently decided we're moving back to Manila and make it a Philippine-based company. And I graduated from MIT last year. So I'm fresh out of college, and a little disclaimer, don't take my word as wisdom, because just like you guys, I'm also trying to learn myself. I have very little experience about the real world, and every day is adding to that experience. And I think of myself as a wishful writer. Wishful in the sense that I attempt to create my own blogs, yet over time I fail to create interesting content. So that's me. Now, today I'm not going to tell you how to become a billionaire. There's a different venue for that, and there's a whole set of different people who's going to give you great advices. In fact, about a month ago, I had a full-time job at Oracle Social Cloud. It was paying so high that I had a very nice apartment overlooking the heart of Atlanta. I had a nice car, and the life was very convenient. Now, it's the 11th of September 2014. I'm back in Manila. I have my startup. I have no income-earning job. I have no nice apartment overlooking the heart of Makati. And I have no car. So that tells you that I'm not the right person to give advice about how to become a billionaire. In fact, just like most of you, I said, I'm also learning. Now, what I'm going to share to you are my experiences and things that I've learned over the past 5 years of being away from the Philippines and living mostly in the United States. Now, my hope is that most of you will be inspired, and I guess take the key points as a motivation to do something better for yourself and maybe for the country. Now, I'm only going to tell you 3 things, just 3 things, very simple things, so it's easy to remember. Now, first off, and one of the things that really made an impact in every decision in my life is I believe in this saying, don't just follow, but lead. Now, growing up, we were taught that a good leader is also a good follower. Now, that's good to some extent, but if everybody of us just follows, we're all going to be in one direction. Of course, not unless you're a fan of One Direction. So, my story starts back in the fall of 2008. I was 15. I was a senior high school student at the boondocks of Leyte. I was a rural boy studying at the Philippine Science High School. I didn't know any better. I've never been to Manila at that time. Now, my high school is one of the few high schools in this country that is lucky to send its students to the top tier colleges in the country, UP, Ateneo, and so on. Now, I was thinking at that time when I was doing my search of where to go to college. I said, Philippine Science High School has existed for, what, 15 years at that time? And probably has produced about 5,000, 6,000 alumni. Now, all of them would have Philippine Science High School in their resume, which is a great high school, I would say. And maybe a majority of them would have, UP in the resume. Some would have Ateneo and so on. And these are great schools. I dream of going to one of them. But I said, I would just be like 95% of Pisay graduates, at least EVC at that time. So I said, well, maybe I could try something else. However, one thing that I realized is I wasn't an A+ student. I wasn't as stellar as the class valedictorian. So I know I won't fare well in the United States. I was initially thinking of applying to American colleges. But I guess what the heck, I'm just gonna try. So I did end up applying to Harvard, applying to other schools, and the 14th of March of 2009, I got a letter that I got accepted to MIT. And after a heated debate in Rappler where MIT is, I'm gonna break my silence, and it's the one in Cambridge. Now, unfortunately for MIT, I accepted their offer. So they're 1+ Filipino out there. Now at that time, I was the only Filipino, or at least someone from the Philippines, to be accepted to the college. So it was one of the biggest risks I took for myself. I was 16 on a flight to Boston with no friend, no family. And the thing about the United States at the time, I only know it as Hollywood, and the American culture as New York City. That is, I didn't know any better. But what the heck, I'm going to fly and take the risk. Which brings me to my next point, take risks. And when I arrived in the United States, it was a different culture, different thing. I know how to speak English, but I was not able to communicate that well. My first semester at MIT was challenging. It was very challenging. Socially, culturally, academically. I thought that being a graduate of Pisay would help me ace the sciences. I didn't develop a good study habit. I wasn't good in my schedule. So I ended up just catching up with my classes. I ended up failing 2 of them, math and physics. Math and physics, what would have been a very easy subject if you were a graduate of Pisay, or at least that's how they tell you. I ended up failing. It was miserable. I got an F. First time in my life, right? But what the heck, I took the risk. I'm not gonna stop here. Another risk that I took was in 2013 when me and my best friend started the company called Muber. Now Muber came out as my thesis project. It was called Project Balikbayan back then. Now if I'm going to tell you, Project Balikbayan at that time wasn't about creating startup. It was just about for me to it was just about to help me graduate MIT. I was cramming my thesis. It was only 2 months before graduation. I haven't done anything. But I met a great advisor. A great advisor told me, do something that relates to you. I was an avid traveler. Me and my best friend went all over Europe and the United States. And the padala system was something that we related to. People asked us to buy things from wherever places we go. So I said, maybe collaborative consumption is a way for me to go for my thesis. But then at the end, my advisor told me, Francis, the grade you get for this thesis is one thing, but bringing this idea to the real world is a whole different story. I am lucky enough to have a very great best friend who was willing to take the risk with me. We know we might fail, but what the heck, we started this. So that brings me to my last third point. Fail, but don't be the failure. Now, I've shared to you my story about failing 2 classes, math and physics. Very terrible for someone who graduated from Pisay. I had calculus, I had classical mechanics in my high school. Why did I fail in the first place? It was miserable. At that time, I was almost suicidal. I said, I'm just going to pack up, go back to the Philippines, and maybe do something else. But then, it turns out, MIT had a great support system. And it turns out, I wasn't the only one failing, which was a relief actually, but the story should not stop there. Second semester, I did develop a good study habit, managed my schedule, and used all the resources that were available around me. So I retook calculus and physics, and it turned out that I passed the class and made the F to an A. So what I realized back then is that I wasn't dumb by failing it, but I can do better. So I took that failure not as a roadblock, but a lesson to do more. Now, there's a thing about us startups, Muber. The Muber story is still being built. We don't know where we might be in 2 or 5 years. We might fail. We may realize that we would be a complete disaster. Or, in the opposite, it may surprise us all. We may become a billion-dollar company. But the only thing that I'm sure right now is that you won't know if you won't try. And I always believe myself that failing to try is the greatest failure. So I said, take risks and don't be afraid of failure. And if you fail, take it as a lesson. Now, I'm lucky enough to have met one of the greatest people that I call team right now. So when you have an idea, when you are thinking of building something, my advice for you, don't take people because of their skills. There's a lot of people who are skilled to do one thing or another. But make a great team that will take the risk with you and that will dare it all. Now I'm gonna end you with a lyric from the Avid Brothers song, "When nothing is owed, deserved or expected, and your life doesn't change by the man that gets elected. If you're loved by someone, you're never rejected. Decide what to be, and go be it." Thank you so much.